we have one more Indian with us today as part of the Voice of the Young series. Hello, everyone. Good to be back. Right now, we have with us Ameya Dandekar. Let's listen to him. Over to you, Ameya.
Well, thank you for having me, Subodh. Having me here today was, I must admit, a bit of an unexpected but a pleasant surprise. And well, when you explained the concept to me, I thought long and hard about what I could speak on, because obviously it's very rare to have a platform where you can just start speaking. So I thought long and hard about this, and I thought, why not just tell a bit of a story? Because what I do, or the path I've chosen, is not something that's very typical, but it has in many ways immense value that or potential that maybe others could follow in.
Okay, let's have it.
So what I started my career with industrial psychology in Ferguson in India, and my motivation at the time for taking psychology as a young and stupid kid was not to take maths. So so I took up psychology, and then I realized it's a very very interesting subject, yeah, because not only is it very versatile, but it's something that it's something that you use everywhere in your life, and it's something that I think teaches the learner far more lessons than the learner can teach others. So I started with industrial psychology, and then I did a couple of internships with the Tata Group, and then I realized there's something missing. Like there needs to be a wider or a bigger picture to the field, and often and very often when you take subjects like psychology, or when you go for engineering, or when you go to any of these fields, you sort of become siloed into it, right? So there's not much so there's not really a lot of space left for a broad diversified set of skills that you can use with a lot of versatility in a lot of different fields.
Okay,
And so I found myself getting siloed at the end of it, at the end of my first masters, and at the end of my internship with the Tata Group. And the head of the HR, who I would report to during my internship, even said to me, have you looked at life beyond psychology? He's like, why did you do psychology if you just wanted to do HR? You should diversify. And he said, there's always room to grow, but you just have to, because you have the resources, you just have to take the leap and figure out whether this is where you want to end up. So I put a bit of thought into it, and I realized what I do can be used in a multitude of different ways in policy making. So I
okay,
said, okay, this is something new, this is something interesting. Uh, I believe I have the right skill sets for this, so let's just take a crack at it.
okay,
Right? So then I started looking for courses in where I could use my skills in psychology to bridge over and then acquire whatever you need for policy. Because back then, and this is when I'm talking 2016, back then, policy making as a career is not something that was very common. You'd hardly hear people going out of Ferguson, going out of their bachelors, going out of their masters, and saying, "Hey, I want to work in policy making, or I want to become a policy analyst, or I want to, become a social impact analyst of some sort." It was still the I want to become an engineer, or I'm going to go, do my MS abroad, or I'm going to do IT.
yeah,
But that was not still prevalent. So it was a courageous decision, but I found a course in Scotland, in the UK, which specialized in behavioral science. and it was a perfect bridge between economics and psychology. Why economics? Because if you ever do anything in policy, it could be as simple as designing a small internship program at a district level, or it could be as complicated as managing the G20. You need economics in everything, because
Yeah.
at the end of it, it all boils down to one, financial viability, of course. But what I realized later on is economics is not just studying Adam Smith or dealing with supply and demand. It's it's a strategic way of thinking.
Yes.
When how
Exactly.
people, yeah, so when how people say, when you learn maths, you learn how to think in a particular way. Economics does something very similar,
Yes.
but it does it in a lot more accessible way, because it's not math. So you're not dealing with very heavy theorems, or you're not dealing with for someone like me who struggled
Mm,
and struggled and struggled through math classes all the way through high school.
mm.
Economics was surprisingly accessible because it distilled the complexity out of the math, but it did not lose the essence of strategic thinking. It could still make you think strategically, it could make you think laterally, but it could do it in a way that was not very intimidating. So I
Depends on
chose.
who's being intimidated.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, hey, I remember 10th CBSE, I got 3 out of 80, right, in my
Yeah.
maths paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can naturally imagine the conversation I had at home when I decided to pick economics. My mom was like, "You got 3 out of 80. We're sure you can do the basic addition, division, multiplication, and subtraction, but beyond that, are you sure you can handle this?" And I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we'll see." So I went into the course over there, and it was very interesting, yeah, because the way economics looks at things is very different than what you expect economics to look at things, right? Because I think, I don't know about today, but back then in India, economics would be supply and demand,
Yeah.
or cost, or profit, or loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
But economics is much more than that. It's actually very, very interlinked with human behavior. And what it does is it tries to give whatever we talk about in psychology a bit of structure and
Yeah.
a bit of, let's just say, mathematical grounding, right? I realized that when I first heard the term, I walked into a class, my very first class in the UK, in Scotland, and the class was on bounded rationality, right? And he started off with how human beings think, and he started off with the cognitive processes. And I'm like, okay, this is psychology so far. This is home ground, right? I'm home.
Yeah.
This is good. But then he introduced something called bounded rationality and the utility function,
Yeah.
which is a mathematical function which essentially tries to predict how you will make decisions by measuring how much satisfaction you get out of making one choice over the other. So that was a very basics. So that's when I realized, and then that's what I meant when I said that what I do has a lot of potential that's not yet realized.
Hmm.
Because people tend to look at economics in a very siloed manner, but they don't look at economics as a tool to predict or understand human behavior. And if they would just look at it from that perspective, they would find out that economics is a very effective tool at that, especially when you fill in the gaps of classical economics with theories from psychology. So we ended up finishing the masters, and at the end of it, my professor pulled me aside and he was like, you really want to go into policy, but for that, you've just got a taste
Yeah.
of economics. Yeah, you need the full Monty. You need the full grounding in core economics as well.
Yeah.
And then he shipped me off to Paris.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to get the Chopuk scholarship, but yeah. So I just currently finished the master's at the Paris School of Economics. And we work at the intersection of policy, political science, psychology, and economics.
Okay.
And there's another thing I realized throughout this entire experience of doing the masters is I don't know when the new education policy in India will come into the picture, but there is a big deficit when it comes to graduate level research in India, and that the scale of it was a bit frightening. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. At the
Yeah.
Paris School of Economics, at least, we have two master's theses, and the master's thesis is something that they take as seriously as they would take a PhD.
Okay.
So the level of academic rigor that
Yeah.
you as a student are expected to put into your
Yeah.
master's thesis
Yeah.
is insane.
Yeah.
And the idea is they don't grade the master's thesis, the final master's thesis at the Paris School of Economics with, okay, how is this as an academic exercise? The metric that they use for grading a master's thesis is how likely is it that this thesis can be published in the top 5 or the top 10 journals.
Yeah.
And if that likelihood is more than 90%, you get the highest grade. And then that's how it goes.
Okay.
The lower the likelihood of it getting published,
Yeah.
the lower your grade.
Okay.
So the amount
So what
of
was your grade?
my grade was about a 14, which is above average, but not at the top 2% of the class. So I would say about the top 10% of the class.
Okay. Good.
But
Congratulations.
given thank you. But given that, given that we started the master with 40 students and only about 20 of us ended up graduating,
Yeah.
so it's still a bit of an achievement.
Well, this is the core difference,
Yeah.
because in India, graduate master's degrees have become industrial shops, mostly.
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah.
there's mass scale manufacturing. And the problem is the large number of students, and faculty just cannot be expected to put in the same level of effort that goes into individualized instruction. So instead, you have rigorous instruction, which is industrial scale, right? You don't have artisanal scale instruction. And that means you can't guide students in research, because guiding in research, you don't just ask a student to do a master's thesis, you are advisor to a student, right?
Yes.
But that's not possible with the large scale. So instead,
I would beg to differ.
Yeah.
I would say in India, it's very much possible.
How's that?
Because look, even in France, where I currently am, even at the undergraduate level, at the bachelor's level, there are 800, 400 students in a class. 400 in a class. But the thing is, only 200 of them, that is 50%, will ever make it past the first year.
See, that's the thing, that you can't do
because
that.
Because the barrier to entry,
you can't do that.
Finishing a bachelor's, they've kept it very, very high.
Yeah, even at Delhi school, people tell me that survival is tough, but the attrition rate is not this high.
Yeah.
So
the attrition rate is not this high because you're not kept back by the university.
See, the attrition rate is by design.
There are. Even at the master's level, if you fail one course at the Paris School of Economics, you cannot redo any exams.
Yeah.
You fail. And if you fail, they will hold you back 1 year just because you failed one course.
Yeah, so this is the way to get excellence in research.
Yes.
But that way is actually not workable at the moment in India. So the research is sadly not there, as you rightly pointed out. The research is not there.
The thing is, there is potential to be there. It's just that we need a slightly different approach to the way we deal with higher education, and we just need a slightly more creative, um, I would say, restructuring.
Okay.
Now, what I mean by that is this: say you have currently in our university framework, if you're doing a master's at, say, Delhi University, for your master's thesis, you do not have the freedom to choose a supervisor outside of Delhi University. But here that's not the case. I could have a supervisor from the University of Lyon, or my thesis supervisor could be from the university in Amsterdam, right? And there is a mechanism, a well-established procedure for the university at the university level to make that happen.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? I am not limited to the professors that are in my university,
True.
and therefore then your supply and demand metric changes, right?
Yes.
Because then being a student at Delhi University, if I want to do research in, say, sociology, and if the best sociology professors are at Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Bombay, I should have the freedom to go and get one of them as my supervisor.
Yeah.
And validate the thesis.
Okay.
So, and that's not a very complicated mechanism to put into place, right?
Okay, I'll leave it at that. This is not my show, it's your show. So I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not a very complicated mechanism to put into place, because
Okay.
I mean, let me assure you of one thing. If it's and this was actually a big culture shock for me when I moved to France, is just how low tech the system is. I mean, this is a country where if you want like a duplicate health certificate because you lost your original one, this is still a country where you have to write a letter and post it in an
Okay.
actual post office,
Okay.
right?
All right.
So that's where we're at.
Okay.
But in spite of that, if they can have this mechanism which reduces load on their own faculty,
Yeah.
then it's very versatile, and versatility is actually what makes the whole thing work.
Okay.
Because the infrastructure, I can assure you, is comparable to India's in terms of proportionality,
Okay.
right? It's just that the institutional policy or the vision to execute it is not there.
All right. Let's continue.
Yeah. So yes, and actually, I actually wanted to go a bit deeper into this because
Okay.
um, because now I can see that there is a lot of scope for broadening the perspective in India, for putting in a lot of the systems in place. So it's a really good opportunity for policymakers who are coming out of India, who are coming out of Ashoka, or who may have done a degree abroad like me, to come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've noticed, that there is a very big uptick. There's now a lot of think tanks. There's now a lot of civil society input
Yeah. Okay.
into government decision making, and for the first time, I've noticed that there is a lot of lateral recruitment,
Mm-hmm.
where you don't need to pass the UPSC to become a, a government employee or join the services at the very senior level.
Yeah. Okay.
You can get hired because of your skills as an economist.
Yeah.
So that's something that's very refreshing, because that's something that I think we've been lacking in the Indian. Because look, me as a student, all I can do is offer sort of an external but insider's perspective
Yeah.
over here.
And certainly, you are trying to resolve a real problem. I'm sure I agree with you
Yeah,
on
and
the
the thing is,
problem.
we already have everything
Yeah.
to resolve it. Like, it's not like we have a deficit of resources. It's not that we don't have the capability. It's just the vision,
Okay.
right? That's where I think we need to sort of pick up.
Okay.
But there is because the potential for developing is huge, because not a lot of people realize it, but academia is actually a very big source of employment, because you have everything from research assistants. If you open a new research center or if you open a new lab, you need lab technicians, you need accountants, you need the research scientists, you need a lot of ancillary stuff. So, if done right, academia can actually be a massive, a massive sponge to soak up the massive graduate talent pool that we've been putting out into the market.
Okay.
So,
All right.
making research itself as a viable career option, it's been done very successfully in India, but it's been done in the natural sciences. It's been done excellently in engineering. We are one of the best in the world, but that's come at a cost of very crucial sciences like the economics and policy making, which at the end of the day you do need to run a country.
Yes.
So paying the same amount of attention there would pay, I think, would pay significant dividends in the coming years. And because I say because of the type of research that we've been doing here, and I'll just give you an example.
Yeah, please.
In
Let's have it.
we have a student here, not me, but we have another student in my department who did his master's thesis on something called behavioral finance. And what it essentially is behavioral finance is a subject which deals with finance through a behavioral perspective.
Okay.
So what he's doing now is he's developing new models to predict the formation of economic bubbles.
Yeah.
Right? And the idea is to use, there are certain behavioral markers, there are certain decisions that people take
Mm-hmm.
uh, in a, in a in a series that can help you predict whether a certain sector in the market has a bubble, or at what stage the bubble is, when
Mm-hmm.
is it about to burst, so on and so forth. And he's done this using something called information cascades, which is something I also presented on just recently here.
Okay.
And information cascades is very simple, not very technical jargon, but it's when it's, well, to put it simply, it's mob mentality or a herd mentality in the financial markets. So I invest in a company because 10 others are investing in a company. Even if I have private information that nobody else knows, but I know, telling me to do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So the tendency to ignore private information and go with the flow or go with the majority decision is something called information cascades.
Okay.
Because two people do it, therefore the third one does it. Now three people do it, therefore the fourth one does it, and that's how it goes. Now the idea is to use this information cascade phenomenon to accurately predict whether an economic bubble is forming.
Mm-hmm.
Because a bubble is nothing but hype.
Mm-hmm.
It's an economic bubble is nothing but an asset or a group of assets getting so overvalued that at one point that overvaluation reaches a saturation point and the bubble bursts.
Yes.
That's what happened with the 2008 financial crisis. The
Yeah.
assumption was that housing prices would never come down.
Yeah.
So people bought houses like crazy because the banks were giving out cheap mortgages, right? But at some point, the this demand for houses led to such a point where I would be buying 3, 4 houses just for the heck of it. And at one point, the bubble burst.
Mm-hmm.
But if I could look at the information cascades,
Mm-hmm.
while this was happening, I could have easily predicted, okay, this is a problem, because there is a lot of private information which says you are taking undue risk, but in spite of that, you have a lot of people doing it.
Yeah.
So identifying behavioral markers or using behavioral markers to identify economic phenomenon is something that he was focusing on. And this research, I was very surprised, is being done at the master's level.
Yeah, it's amazing actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what really stuck me in my experience in Scotland and in France. It's having a very strong network or having a very, very strong foundation for research at the master's level is very crucial, because what happens is this guy then directly gets picked up by the French Ministry in Economics, or by a consultancy, or by JP Morgan, because he's already demonstrated the capability to, well, carry out research of this caliber.
Right. Okay.
Right. And doing and putting graduate research at the very forefront also makes developing your core skills very accessible,
Yeah.
because you're doing it through public universities.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something I see as a huge potential for India, which I hope that the NEP will address significantly when it actually does kick in. Because what that does is three things. One, it will build your talent pool, like it will build excellent skills into your talent pool. Second, it incentivizes the universities themselves to develop their own infrastructure or to develop their own faculty, because you cannot have students who are doing research of this caliber if you do not have the faculty to back them up.
Right.
And you're seeing the beginnings of that with Ashoka, I think, and even SNU
Yeah.
and the private universities, where the faculty is top notch, and therefore the research output that comes out of this is also top notch. That's why you now have JPAL, you have CSBC, the Center for Social and Behavioral Change at Ashoka. And if you notice, these centers, they directly work as consultants and advisors for state governments.
Yeah.
Which means state governments have already saved a huge chunk of their costs, because they get their policy evaluations done by Ashoka graduates. It provides the graduates with a stable career path. It provides them with a good start to their career,
Mm-hmm.
and it provides state governments with much needed consultancy, and they don't
Yeah.
have to pay McKinsey in the process.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that's a very striking difference that I saw. Of
Good.
course, the French system is in no way perfect, but what they've achieved through their public education system is something that's very commendable.
Yeah.
And one thing they're not shy on is discipline. If you fail, you fail. There
Okay.
is no, you don't graduate if you don't put in the work.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something we need to do now, because, like you said, we are manufacturing degrees,
Yeah.
but to extend the metaphor further, how good is our quality testing
Well,
of the
what I
final
would
product?
say is that the input is good, the value added is not good.
Yeah,
You
the
have
input is good. The
input
value
is
added,
good, value added is not enough. So
which is why,
you still get good output, but you can't get excellent output because you
no,
didn't add value. This is the single, you are rightly pointing it out in the form of research, but overall, the value added to top students is not commensurate with their abilities. It's
yeah,
not just not commensurate with their abilities. And you see it in the undergraduate students. I've talked to so many of them now. They end up doing internships
yes,
because their courses are too easy. They can
yes,
do these internships because their courses are too easy. So the
yeah,
value added in the class is just not enough. So people have grabbed that resource with the new technology and exploited that resource in the form of unpaid internships, because you are just, I mean, in my days we just used to waste our time, okay, because there was nothing to do.
right,
Now, so we just used to play cards, okay. What
right,
else, but today the young people are all getting value added, from the internships, because the classroom teaching, the value added is not enough. And even at the master's level, the value added is not enough. And you don't get the excellent output, even though you got an excellent input. But over time, so you are saying it's not there in the form of research, but research is just form of value addition, right?
Yes.
Yes, but that's not there. You're absolutely right. And if you go to level 3 universities, they are just holding cells.
Oh, yeah.
There's no question of value added. It's just a place where you can pretend to be a student. Teachers pretend to be teachers and students pretend to be students. But at the end of it, there's no teaching and no learning anyway. Anyway, let me not talk so much. It's your turn. Otherwise, I'll never stop. Okay, go ahead, please.
No, but that is true. And there is, but I'll tell you one of my experiences here. And, this may come across as, well, not many people would have the experience, but one thing you realize very, very quickly is the two ways of dealing with diversity. There is a European way and there is an Indian way. And that difference becomes very, very apparent if you notice, because when I compare India, I compare it with the European Union.
Okay.
Directly, because but what you notice here is within the European Union, particularly in France, they are not as used to diversity as we Indians are. Where yes, there are many communities living in France, many communities coming in from North Africa, many communities coming in from the Middle East, but they are so siloed within. So in Paris, there is a Lebanese neighborhood, there is a Tunisian neighborhood, and they never mix. So yes, you can say Paris is it's a multicultural capital, it's a European capital, but it's very segregated in that sense. And that was something which was very surprising for me, because normally, if you look at the European Union as a whole, you see it from the outside as a very diverse place, and it is. But the way they handle diversity is through, okay, I have my community, you have yours. We will each sort of keep to our own lane, and that will be the end of that.
Okay.
Right. Which is not the case with India.
Okay. All right.
India is very mixed in that sense. India is very open.
Yeah.
In that sense. So even if you make a slight effort, for example, I could integrate well. We lived for 5 years in Gujarat, and my mother could integrate very well, even though she did not speak Gujarati. You would never get away with that if you did not in France if you do not speak French.
Yeah.
And that was very surprising as well.
Okay.
Because even for Italians coming over here, or we had people from Spain, we had people from Italy, and that was very apparent even for the Italians, because even they were very surprised as to, okay, we are Europeans, we are literally neighbors, but we are excluded from French society because we are not French.
Okay.
We may be Italians, we may be Swedish, but we are not French.
Okay.
And that matters in France. And I was very surprised to see the extent to which that matters.
All right.
Which was very interesting to see for me as an academician, as an economist.
All right. Anything else you want to add here?
Anything else? No. What about you? Anything else you would like to add?
This is not my time to speak, because this is the time for you to speak. I talk too much anyway, so I can't start, because if I start, it'll take too long. This voice of the young is designed for young people, and I'm just a listener here. So I'm just asking you if you have anything more you want to add, and let's see, let's hear from you. Like, I had no idea this is the way it is in France, but you told us. Good. Anything else you want to add?
Well, what would I add? Look, I would add just my 2 cents, if I could call it that.
Okay.
Just as a normal Indian student who just happened to have done a French degree, right? And my 2 cents is this: there is immense, immense potential in India, not just from a point of view of research, but overall, when you see India from outside, when you experience France, in some ways, in for example, it can be adopting technology for fintech. It can be your basic services. India is far ahead.
Okay.
I can tell you that very easily.
Okay.
I mean, the amount of places in France, in the center of Paris, you could go to a very expensive restaurant and they will not take your debit card if the transaction is below a certain amount.
Okay.
It's still a very cash based economy,
Okay.
which is not something you expect. So I would say this: as an Indian citizen, and as a student of economics, we have immense potential in the sense that we already have developed most of the expertise and most of the means to sort of leapfrog, even in education, even in the social sciences. We need someone with political will to make that happen.
Okay.
And it is crucial because you can have the most technologically advanced society in the world, right?
Yeah.
You can have that. But at the end of the day, you cannot have a good economy without good economists.
Okay.
And given what I've seen here in Europe, you cannot have a developed economy without first having a developed society.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a very simple example of that. We had this discussion in class as well. When I say a developed, what do I mean when I say a developed society? What do we associate with a developed society? A society that has a strong sense of liberty, of freedom, of getting rid of prejudicial practices, and and the way it directly impacts economy is very, very simple to demonstrate. For example, there are a lot of countries around the world where even today women are not allowed to work. For example, thankfully India is not one of them, but still there are a lot of countries in the world. Now, we as a group, we were asked to take a social problem as an assignment and demonstrate the economic implications of it. And we had chosen this participation of women in the workforce. And we said, look, at any given point, for any average country, women are likely to be about 50%, or at the very least 40%, or 45% of the population. The average, if you take the average salary of a country, which is, say, not just for example, say it's 2,000 euros a month. If your women cannot work, then what is your then that means 50% of your population who is capable of earning at least 2,000 euros a month is not earning 2,000 euros a month.
Yeah.
What is the cost of that?
Yeah.
What is the economic cost of that?
Okay.
That means 50% tax base is already gone.
Yeah.
50% of your GDP nominal is already gone because 50% of your population is not working. You cannot sustain an economy where only 50% of the economy works.
Okay.
You absolutely cannot.
Right.
And unfortunately, that is still a reality. But when you put social practices through an economic lens, that's when the true cost of the social practices come into the picture.
Okay. All right.
And I think for a lot of us in India, I think doing that, putting an economic lens on some of our social practices might just help us to understand just what they cost to maintain.
Yeah.
And therefore, for India in the next 10 years, and I'm not an expert, I'm not an analyst. I'm just an Indian student who happens to have experienced 2, 3 different countries. But for India to be a developed economy in this sense, it will first need to become a developed society. There is no way you will have an India with an economy as developed as Scandinavia if you do not have a society as developed as Scandinavia.
Okay. All right. That's a good
Yeah.
thought to leave the viewers with.
Yeah.
It's a very clear statement.
Yeah.
And I think it is a statement that should resonate with young people. I
Yeah.
mean, more, because who are more flexible and more open rather than with older people who are stuck in their ways. Okay. Anything else, or shall we end it today here?
Sure, we can end it today here.
Okay. We'll catch up with you perhaps in 1 year to see where
Sure.
you are and what's going
Absolutely.
on in your work and life. Let's end it
Yes.
here today. Let's say bye to the viewers. I'll be
Yeah.
back with a young person or an
Yes.
expert soon. And thank you so much, Ameya, for being here. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.